The first question is connected with personal considerations as to how best to collate reliable data for quantitative analysis. It was felt from the very beginning that for the results of any test to be reliable, the method of collecting student responses had to be somehow unobtrusive. Thus, handing out lengthy questionnaires in printed form was immediately excluded, as it tends to have a negative impact on student motivation. And also, the student is fully aware of the fact that they are participating in a piece of academic research, which means that their responses are less likely to be spontaneous and genuine. Indeed, in a critique of modern sociological and psychological research methods, Professor Richard Wiseman indicates that when the subject of research is presented with a questionnaire, they start to contemplate what the correct answer is, or which answer the researcher is most likely to wish to hear. With the use of response system, this problem is obviated, as the research question in point can be integrated into the general lesson content without the students being aware of the fact that they are subject to any type of scientific investigation. Furthermore, when it comes to the collection of a mass of data for analysis, it is a bulky and time-consuming process to hand out photocopies for each and every single reading or listening exercise, then collect them and collate the material according to subject, not to mention the task of transposing the data from the photocopy into electronic form for ease of analysis and management. With the response system, the students simply hold the response clickers and type in the answers. The system can be used in order to collect a vast corpus of data, which can then be subject to analysis. Because of the systematic use of the cards, they remain unobtrusive, as the students view them more as a didactic tool than a research collection platform. Consequently, the material collected from student responses is reliable. This assertion can be further supported by the fact that as the students have the response card in hand and are expected to insert their answers in real time, there is much less chance of collaboration, meaning that the responses of one student will not influence the responses of another. Equally, it is virtually impossible to copy the answers of a fellow student, as there is no written work to look at. Thus, the responses logged by each individual are exactly that, individual responses. Thus, when it comes to the analysis of the mass of data, one can be certain that the individual subjects of the analysis are in no way fainted or false. Despite the relative lack of concrete quantitative research which supports the clear existence of disparate learning styles, or the existence of a method of assessment of learning style which is universally acclaimed, it was decided that sufficient evidence exists to justify further investigation into the claim made by Ellis that the males and females adopt disparate approaches to the task of learning. After careful consideration, the learner style questionnaire developed by Honey and Mumford was chosen, as it is both based upon the pioneering work of Kolb and has been subject to continuous development and adaptation since its inception at the beginning of the 1980s. For a full discussion of this subject, please refer to the article. The test identifies the preference of the learner for one of four basic learner styles, with the level of correlation between expressed as being either very strong, moderate, low, or very low, depending on how far the respondents score in each section differs from the statistical mean calculated by Honey and Mumford on the basis of over 10,000 completed surveys. The four learner styles are as follows. Activists like to take direct action. They are enthusiastic and welcome new challenges and experiences. They are less interested in what has happened in the past or in putting things into a broader context. They are primarily interested in here and now. They like to have a go, try things out and participate. They like to be the center of attention. Reflectors like to think about things in detail before taking action. They take a thoughtful approach. They are good listeners and prefer to adopt a low profile. They are prepared to read and reread and will welcome the opportunity to repeat a piece of learning. Theorists like to see how things fit into an overall pattern. They are logical and objective system people who prefer a sequential approach to problems. They are analytical, pay great attention to detail, and are perfectionists. Pragmatists like to see how things work in practice. They enjoy experimenting with new ideas. They are practical, down-to-earth, and like to solve problems. They appreciate opportunity to try out what they have learned. The 480 question version of the test was used during the second lesson held with each of the groups under analysis. This was incorporated into a general discussion on the subject of learning styles and how an awareness of the most appropriate style of learning might enhance the acquisition process. Thus, it is hoped that the learners in question responded to the questionnaire honestly, as the test was introduced not as a part of a research project, but as an essential element of the curriculum designed to improve the results of learning. The audience response system was used in part to help establish it as a regular feature of the classroom environment, and in part to attempt to enhance the credibility of the data, as the PowerPoint presentation on learning styles was interwoven with the questions to further disguise the nature of the exercise. The results of the survey were collated and I shall now present them in a pie chart for ease of comparison. And then discuss the implications. The first of the four learner styles is the activist. The majority of the female respondents, 56%, showed a very strong preference for an activist learning style, while a further 12% had a strong preference. The remainder had either a moderate or low tendency. Conversely, just 37% of the male respondents showed a very strong inclination towards an activist style, with a further 19% had a strong preference. Just 12% of the female sample had a very strong preference for the reflector style, while a further 28% had a strong inclination. In contrast, 37% of males demonstrated a very strong bias towards the reflector style, with a further 25% being strongly inclined. In terms of the theorist style, the difference was far less marked, with 8% of females and 6% of males having a very strong inclination, and 20% of females and 25% of males having a strong preference. Finally, 12% of female participants had a very strong preference for the pragmatist style, with a further 28% having a strong inclination. In stark contrast, 37% of males had a very strong bias and 25% were strongly inclined to this style. The first and most obvious conclusion to be drawn is that there is no clear indication that it is possible to say that all males have an inclination towards one or two learner styles, while all females have a contrasting preference. It would have been naive to expect such results, and it is with relief that it is possible to confirm that this is not a fact. Analysis of the data does, however, allow one to draw some tentative conclusions in terms of general trends which go beyond the realms of margin of error. Returning to Ellis, it would appear that his basic premise that males are more adventurous is, according to the results obtained here, erroneous. Indeed, the clear indication is that more females prefer the activist style, with a 19% differential in tendency for a very strong preference. This indicates that females have a stronger inclination towards getting involved in something new and learning from novel experiences. Conversely, males are 3 times more likely to have a strong inclination towards the reflector learning style, which indicates a more considered and careful approach to learning, with a clear emphasis on the collection and analysis of information. Interestingly, neither males or females had a bias towards the theory style of learning, which begs the question as to why. This question in itself would present an interesting topic for further research, and I shall refrain from hypothesizing at this moment in time. Finally, turning our attention to the pragmatist style, it is possible to see a slight male inclination with a ratio of 3:2 in favor of male orientation towards a very strong preference. So, in summary, it would appear that the data provided by this limited study indicates that females have an inclination towards novelty and creative learning, which has a constant change of focus. Males, on the other hand, would appear to be far more analytical in approach, with a clear preference for analyzing and contemplating information before being allowed to draw their own conclusions in their own time. Clearly, making sweeping assumptions on the basis of such a small sample group would be irresponsible at best, but it is hoped that at some point in the future a large-scale analysis will prove a more compelling case for a clear link between gender and learning style. I thank you for taking the time to listen and would be delighted to hear any feedback or comments which you may have.